What's going on, guys? Welcome back. I know it's been a very long time since I've done a video, but I figured a good way to get back into this would be to do an updated 2025 EDC. So starting off with all of the normal things. In one pocket I have my phone. In the other pocket I keep my wallet, chapstick, and car key. And then on my hands, I almost always wear a watch on my left and then some sort of stuff on this right hand. And I imagine a lot of you carry similar things on your person. None of this precludes me from carrying the way that I do for protection and shouldn't preclude you either. So getting into the most interesting part of this video that most of you are probably interested to see. For the handgun, what we have here is a Staccato C2. Basic specs on this, we have a 3.8-inch barrel. We have 16+1 of the gun chambered in 9mm. For all of the detailed specs of this gun, we'll do a video on that in the near future if you're interested to see. But for this video, we're going to focus mainly on the why and the what, how I've made this gun my own. For starters, many of you have seen previous videos of my other carry setups, so the Dan Wesson 1911 Valor Bobtail and the CZ-P10C. Both great guns in their own right. Really loved my experience with both of them, still own both of them. But this, to me, this build represents the best of both of those guns. Not just in form and function, but also all of the things that we've done to make this mine. For this build, we're gonna go kind of muzzle backward, starting with this light. This is an interesting choice. I'm sure many of you have not seen this before. This is a Phoenix GL19R. I know people have strong feelings about Phoenix, or maybe they've never heard of it. I'm not claiming this is the most durable light in the world, but based on spec, on paper, and my use so far, this is the best light I could find for this setup. The things that matter to me are, one, output. We have 1500 lumens here. Candela is unspecified, but when I compare this to my other lights, like a Surefire X300, not the turbo, like a TLR9, this candela is close, somewhere between those two, and for a carry gun, for me, that is more than sufficient. If, however, you're thinking about this light and you don't think it's sufficient candela, they do have a V2 with a longer bezel that gives you a little bit more punchiness to that beam. The other features for this are that on the C2, it's kind of a strange length of rail, where this is the only, at least at the time that I bought this is the only light that was about flush with the muzzle. Common options like a TLR7 would have been just past here. For me, my preference is always going to be to have that light about flush, or as you can see here, just slightly proud to create a little bit of standoff if ever I was shooting from retention. Other small things that do matter to me are, there is kind of a quick release, so if ever I wanted to run without the light, it's very easy to get on and off. And this is also USB-C rechargeable. You can recharge it from here, or you can pull your battery out and use a outlet-based recharger. Either way though, having the ability to recharge your battery is to me more convenient than having to switch frequently. The switches on this light are also in a good spot. You can kind of see all the way up here. They're activated by pushing forward, or more commonly for me, if I were going to use this, I would use my support hand side thumb to activate that light. I very much prefer having my switches high rather than low, where you'd have to modify your grip and drop your support hand thumb in order to reach it down there. So up here, for me, much better. The last thing worth mentioning with this light is that this is also essentially a single stack width. So whether this was on this gun or any other gun, it's not going to be double wide like an X300 or any of the other full-size lights that take two CR123s side by side. This is effectively the same width as this slide. On the top end of our slide for our sighting system, what we have is a Chambers Customs RDSM mount. That is just the portion below my optic. I do think that for a 1911-2011, this is the best option for mounting a red dot. Whether it's a RMR footprint or otherwise, I still think this is the best choice. It is a bit of a hassle getting it done because Chambers only certifies, I think, 3 gunsmiths in the US to do this process. But at the end of it, what you have is a mount system that is, 1, extremely secure, 2, it sits about as low as I've ever seen on a 2011 or 1911 platform, and 3, this is preference, but if you're running backup irons, you run them forward of your optic. We'll circle back to that in a second here. The optic itself that I'm running is a Trijicon SRO 5 MOA. I have found, compared to other choices that I've run on this gun or that you've seen on my other guns, the SRO is certainly larger, has a lot more vertical space this way, so that when I am tracking that dot under recoil, it never really leaves the window. The other thing that's nice about having a larger dot is that I can run it at a lower brightness. To me, the way I see the dot, I have a bit of astigmatism, so it's a little starbursty when I have a smaller dot. I've run dots as small as 1 MOA. And I have found that when running at a higher brightness because of the smaller dot, the brighter the dot, the more likely my eyes are to follow the dot under recoil. So say I'm transitioning target to target or under recoil as it goes up and down, I'm more likely to see my eyes start doing this with a small bright dot, whereas with a larger dot at a slightly lower setting, I don't find myself following the dot. I can keep my eyes trained on my point of impact a lot better. So the SRO to me has been the best choice. That said, if this were a duty handgun and I were law enforcement, military, probably would not be the same. But considering that I don't drive nails with my optic, I'm not Aaron Cowan, this to me is the best choice. It does, however, preclude me from running backup irons on the rear. I will say that given this setup, you do have this top index on the SROs. I still have a front sight that I believe in a self-defense situation, if I really had to, my optic went down, I could still get horizontal centering. And whether or not I have my vertical aim correct or my vertical point of impact correct really relies on my level of training. The pros, however, of this setup, despite that con, is that with the RDSM system, you have your SRO sitting far enough backward that you don't have any overhang from the housing of that optic over your breech face like you normally would in a more traditional setup. So to me, for now anyway, this is the best sighting system that I've settled on for this gun. Again, specific to daily carry. Getting into the ignition system in this gun, we can't show you that as per YouTube's policies, but the ignition system here, so my sear, my hammer, and all the accompanying springs actually came out of my Dan Wesson 1911. That may to you be sacrilege that I cannibalized parts. However, to me, what that feels like is this gun is the spiritual successor to the Dan Wesson, which was a very meaningful gun to me. It was one of my first carry guns. That Dan Wesson, whether it was an outlier and it was one of their best guns they ever made, like that specific serial, it had one of the best triggers I've ever felt in the 1911 platform. So for me, carrying that over into this gun was a big deal. I did try a handful of other setups. I hand fit parts, and maybe I'm not that good, but I did hand fit parts for this gun. Could never get it quite the same as Dan Wesson. So the best fit to me, and I lucked out that it still fit into this platform, was to swap those parts over. And I'm really happy with the way this trigger looks and feels. If you want to do the Ghost with me, we will go gun cleared and safe, obviously. Here's that take up. Here's that break. And then that reset, nothing. So still just as good as that last gun. The additional adjustment I've added here is that trigger shoe, trigger bow system. That is going to be a red dirt precision. The things that I liked about the red dirt over other options like a X-Line Vario would be the fact that this trigger shoe itself, while it's not adjustable for length this way, it is machined out of a solid piece of aluminum, and they have 5 different lengths. So as long as you know about how long your finger is, how large your hand is, good chance they have a size for you. The other thing that was unique to Red Dirt is that they machined their trigger bow from a solid piece of stock. Most trigger bows are stamped from a sheet of metal, which means that they are a little bit more malleable, essentially more prone to bending. This trigger bow is much more solid, which I really appreciate, especially in a polymer grip firearm like this one. The trigger itself is adjustable for pre-travel and over-travel via set screw, not via tabs. The tabs work, obviously. That's what exists on most other triggers. I just prefer having the set screw because it's a little bit more of a fine-tuning adjustment. It's a little easier to change if ever I had to. Continuing rearward to our safeties, what we have here is that Dan Wesson Valor Bobtail grip safety. Love this part. It already felt familiar to me, and a distinct difference between this and the Staccato factory safety is, one, you have a little bit more of an upswept beaver tail here, which when you go to draw your firearm, if you are getting after that aggressively and you are a little bit higher, that upswept beaver tail, that exaggeration there, helps a lot to make sure you have a little bit wider of a funnel to get your hand where it needs to be. Whereas the Staccato grip safety, for those of you who have seen or owned one, you know that it comes straight back and is a bit short. You may think that's more comfortable for carry. However, I've noticed no difference when carrying. The biggest thing for me, again, is just the consistency of my draw and presentation with that higher upswept safety. You will, of course, when you install this or any other part into your gun, want to fit it to your frame. It's another thing I noticed with the factory Staccato grip safety is that it wasn't really that well fit, where any range session that was longer than, say, a couple hundred rounds, I would start to have a little bit of a blister or callus forming right where my hand meets that grip safety, or I guess I should say where that grip safety meets the frame of the gun. So even if you run the stock one, still a smart thing if you have the ability to recoat after, still a smart thing to fit that to your frame. As for my thumb safety, coming around to this side, this is an EGW stainless safety that I recoated myself, but the oversized safety for me is a big deal because I want to make sure I can always get that off quickly as I present. And I know people argue about this all the time. That manual safety for me has never prevented me from getting my first shot off quickly. I've never missed a manual safety. I do think it's a training thing. So if you're averse to the manual safety, I wouldn't let it turn you off from having a gun like this. It's just a thing that you need to train and be consistent with. You will notice that I went away from having the ambi safety, and for me, that is just because if I had the ambi safety, I cannot actually deactivate it. Knuckle on that first finger will get in the way of that other side. It does help a little bit with concealability as well, so for more reasons than one, I prefer to have this single side safety. This is, and all Staccatos except for the HDs are a Series 70, so there is no internal drop safety to play with. Moving into the slide and frame, you'll notice that not much has changed with the slide other than the RDSM that we mentioned earlier. And obviously we have burnt bronze Cerakote. That to me is the correct color for a gun. You could argue with me, but you're wrong. The Cerakote I do in the garage. Christine allows me to do that in our oven in the kitchen here as well. The only thing material that I've changed on the frame is going to be, other than matching Cerakote, we have this here, if you can see on that left side of the gun, a thumb rest or a gas pedal, however you like to say. That did require kind of a lot of commitment and courage for me to drill and tap a piece of scrap aluminum into a gun that cost me many thousands of dollars. What you get from that addition is the ability to better control recoil and to get a more predictable return to zero without compromising the concealability of the gun. So you've seen this on other platforms, but basically what I'm going to be doing is putting my weak hand, my support hand thumb there, applying just a little bit of downward inward pressure so that under recoil, my left hand can contribute a little bit more to the return to zero. So this grip is still the factory C2 grip. It does look a bit different because I have stippled this also in the garage. The stipple pattern that I use is a bit like if you lift weights, you know what knurling looks like, that sort of pyramid shape. It's very similar to this, just this is bigger. What I have on both side panels is something that's a little bit less aggressive than on the back strap here and the front strap here. It is super aggressive because to me, that is where it's most important to have grip. And then obviously side panels are the ones that will touch my body and my shirt when I'm carrying, so I want them a little bit less aggressive. Going deeper into the gun, you can't see this, I can't show you as per YouTube policies, but my recoil system is a DPM adjustable. DPM, they talk a lot about their technology using multiple springs. I don't know for sure if that's the value to me. To me, it's more so that I have a lot of adjustability in this system where depending on if I am running this setup or I have a compensated barrel, whatever the case may be, I have the ability to run different springs at different lengths and different weights so that my return to zero is a little bit more automatic, where I know where that dot is going to fall every single time I break a shot. So separate from the gun, moving into mags, this is a factory 120mm mag. The thing that we've changed here is if you look at the base plate, it's aluminum base plate that I have dehorned. You may or may not be able to make out the corners of that mag. Dehorned that and then recoated, again, Cerakote, just so that when I carry this, for one, on the inside against my body, it's not going to poke into me. On the outside of the gun, this is not going to be visible underneath my shirt in the same way it would be if that were a hard corner. For my spares, when I carry a spare, what I have is a full length 20 round. This has the 10.8 performance base plates, Hilton Yam. was very smart for making these, because if you were to run this mag tube in a C2 or commander size grip, you would have this problem with over insertion. Not live ammo, but this problem with over insertion where without that base plate to block off against the base of your grip, what you'd have is that mag going all the way up into your ejector and eventually damaging your ejector. So having your longer base plate there prevents over insertion. Make sure that ejector lasts a little bit longer. And then in my case, I did not recoat these, but you can see that I did dehorn the inside of that as well. So when I do carry this mag against my body, it's not going to poke into me. So we're getting into the actual carry setup. The belt that I'm running is a Hunter Constantine carry belt. Shout out to Cloak and Dagger Solutions, Ken Jang. I actually won this at one of his classes. But this belt has been very helpful for me compared to everything else that I've run. I've run maybe 5 different setups for a belt. And I like this a lot because what you have on the front is this semi-rigid reinforced section to support the weight of your holster and your whole rig. And on the back, what you have is adjustability, but also elastic, so that when you do move, when you go to sit, when you go to run, you have a little bit of freedom on the back side and around your sides, but you still have the support enough to carry a full-size, fully loaded gun. And on that side, you don't have a large buckle to try to conceal. You have just this little hook here, and you can hook that onto either of these 2 slots for some added adjustability without having to adjust at your tab there. Moving into the holster setup, you guys have seen some of these from me before, so this is one of them that I've made myself. I don't make and sell holsters, not anymore anyway, but these are some things maybe you look for in your next holster setup. So what I have here is an integrated wedge. This is just extra material in the holster, thermoform, so we have, a fairly large wedge. It's really important that you have enough surface area here so that you don't have any hot spots poking into you. You'll also notice the shape of that wedge is very rounded here. There's no hard corner to poke into you, especially when you're sitting down. So what we have is a wedge on the back side, large surface area. On the front side, you'll notice those clips have a little bit of standoff where they are actually angled a bit from the holster. And then like many holsters that you're familiar with, we have that bit of a wing there. So all of these things in conjunction, what it'll do is it'll tip that gun back toward my body and angle the grip into me so that it does not print nearly as bad for a gun this size. Obviously adjustability for retention at 2 points here, accommodations for all the things on my gun or on this build. On the back side here, you will see 2 extra holes that are used to attach a mag carrier. I don't generally, on a day-to-day basis, carry a spare mag on my body. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I do have the ability to do that if I was going to go somewhere where I thought it would be prudent to have that there. The other, and maybe last, to me, most important feature here is a safety lockout. So on a single action firearm, namely 192011s, where your safety is positioned down to fire, up for safe. What I've done in this holster is I've made it so that you could not holster without having that safety engaged. If I were to flip that safety off, cut a holster the gun, it'll actually flip that safety on for me. So for me, on a single action firearm, this is just an added layer. We do have obviously that safety, we have a thumb safety, and in this case, we have an extra safety lockout in my holster to make sure that I am always safe as I'm carrying the gun. That safety cannot be deactivated on an accident while the gun is in the holster. Anytime I leave the house, I'm gonna have this bag with me. This is an Alpha 19er 1.0X. This is one of our more recent bags. It is much more structured, so despite being smaller, it does hold all the stuff I need it to hold, and probably more than that. The point of this though is not the bag, it's just all the things that I carry with me when I leave the house that are not on my person. So most often that spare mag is gonna be in the bag. I will have medical, so tourniquet, high-fin chest seal, hemostatic gauze, some random medications. Then random tools that may or may not be useful, flashlight. I do carry a knife off body. This is definitely more for opening packages and admin tasks than it ever will be for self-defense. Were I in a situation that was non-permissive for me to be carrying, I would likely be carrying not this knife, but a different knife. And I do feel that many of us who carry knives with a thought of self-defense would be better off with something like this, which also lives in my bag, pepper spray. Because this is easier to use without much skill at all. Whereas fighting with a knife, I don't know how to do that. I wonder sometimes if any of us really do. And that just about sums up my EDC for 2025. You guys have seen the evolution from the past few into this one. So if there's anything I could say is I would encourage you to consistently evaluate your own and see if there's anything you can do to make it a little bit more optimized for your own life. If you guys want to share with me your current setup, I would love to hear from you. Comment down below. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and I will look forward to making the next video much sooner.